On Tuesday's edition of the briefing, we're asked a serious question. Are Americans increasingly inhabiting two separate nations divided by political extremes and largely determined by worldview? That's the very important question that was raised last week by the Pew Research Center in a report it released that, perhaps more than anything in recent times, demonstrates once again the importance of worldview. The Pew Research Center's report is on the increasing political polarization among Americans. The upshot of the report is this: Americans are increasingly inhabiting two separate political worlds. And the report also makes clear that there are other issues that are deeply and inextricably involved with this polarization. And in issues related to this, last week Terry Goss of Fresh Air on NPR interviewed Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State and United States Senator, who's currently on an extended book tour given the release of her new memoir, Hard Choices. And in this particular interview on NPR, Hillary Clinton gets rather angry with Terry Goss over questions related to the evolution of her position on same-sex marriage. The background of this story is easy to understand. When Hillary Clinton was in the Senate, she was against the legalization of same-sex marriage. When she was confirmed as Secretary of State, she was opposed to the legalization of same-sex marriage. Before that, when she ran for the Democratic nomination for the United States presidency, she was against same-sex marriage. Shortly after she resigned as the United States Secretary of State, she declared that she was for same-sex marriage. Very convenient, given she is the Democratic frontrunner for the presidential nomination in 2016. Tuesday, Dr. Mueller reported on Monday's edition of the New York Times, which had a headline that ran, "Obama pushes Iraqis to mend sectarian rifts." As President Obama weighs airstrikes against marauding militants in Iraq, he has concluded that any American military action must be conditioned on a political plan to try to heal Iraq's sectarian rifts that are only about 1,400 years old or so. The issue of the Bible and biblical authority came front and center last week as a major study released by the Gallup organization. As Gallup revealed, 28% of Americans believe the Bible is the actual Word of God and that it should be taken literally. But they say about half of Americans continue to say the Bible is the inspired Word of God not to be taken literally, meaning that a combined 75% believe the Bible is in some way connected to God. 1 in 5 Americans view the Bible in purely secular terms, which is up from 13% in 1976. An interesting story appeared in Time magazine this week. The headline is "Union Theological Seminary becomes the world's first seminary to divest from fossil fuels." Union Theological Seminary, the flagship seminary of Protestant liberalism, made Time magazine because they said, "We are divesting our endowment funds from anything having to do with fossil fuels." Serene Jones, who is president there, said, "At Union Theological Seminary in New York City, we have a particular call to live out our values in the world. Our Board of Trustees voted unanimously to divest the school's $108.4 million endowment from fossil fuels. Then they all jumped in their expensive cars and went home and enjoyed the electricity in their homes, all provided by fossil fuel." Thursday, Dr. Mueller reports that 2014 is hardly over, but we already know what the biggest event of the year will be. That event is the World Cup in Brazil. Right now, roughly 1/2 of all living human beings on the planet will watch at least part of the World Cup games. And speaking of sports, David Epstein wrote in the New York Times, "Sports should be child's play." He writes, "The national fervor over concussions misses the primary scourge that is harming kids and damaging youth sports in America. The heightened pressure on child athletes to be essentially adult athletes has fostered an epidemic of hyper-specialization that is both dangerous and counterproductive. Children are playing sports in too structured a manner too early in life on adult-sized fields and spending too much time in one sport. It can lead to serious injuries and a lesser ultimate level of athletic success." Epstein makes very clear that the science is demonstrating that the parents who press their kids so hard actually produce the athletes that turn out in the middle tier, not the top tier. The athletes that show up on the first team of the Olympics and the athletes at the very top of their game are those who at some point of their childhood or adolescence adopted the game themselves or the sport and said, "This is mine," and they gave themselves to it out of joy, not out of parental pressure. Finally, the Observer in London reports that one D-Day veteran was told by his nursing home in Britain that he could not attend the 70th anniversary of D-Day. And so Bernard Jordan, age 89, broke out of the nursing home, found his way to a ferry, crossed the English Channel, and attended, wearing all of his his medals from D-Day. When Mr. Jordan escaped from the nursing home in Brighton, he found his way upon a ferry. Then there he stood with his fellow veterans, wearing all of his uniforms and his medals. Proof positive that when you have a veteran who stormed the beaches of Normandy in 1944, you have someone who is not going to be held down by a nursing home in 2014. God bless him.